the Israelites arrived at the edge of the Jordan River, gazing across at the promised land that had been foretold to them for generations. For 40 long years they had wandered the wilderness, guided by the pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, sustained by manna from heaven. Moses, their faithful leader who had led them out of bondage in Egypt and to the very precipice of Canaan, would not cross over with them. He had angered the Lord by striking the rock to bring forth water rather than just speaking to it as commanded. As punishment, God decreed that Moses would only see the promised land from afar but never set foot in it. With a heavy heart, Moses gathered the people to deliver his final instructions and farewells. He recounted the journey they had taken, the miracles the Lord had performed, and the laws they must follow. He passed the mantle of leadership to Joshua, in whom the same spirit that had empowered Moses now resided. Then Moses departed alone to the top of Mount Nebo, where God showed him a sweeping vista of the fertile land of Canaan and its future glories. There on the mountain, at 120 years old, Moses died and was buried by the Lord himself, in a hidden grave unknown to this day. The people mourned deeply for Moses, the only man who had spoken to the Lord face to face as a friend. But they placed their trust now in Joshua to lead them into battle to take possession of their inheritance. Joshua wasted no time in dispatching 2 spies across the river to reconnoiter the walled city of Jericho, the first mighty obstacle in their path. The spies crept into Jericho and took lodging in the house of Rahab, a harlot who lived in the city wall. Their presence was noticed and reported to the king, who dispatched soldiers to Rahab's dwelling to arrest the Israelite agents. But Rahab, having heard of the Israelites' God and believing he would give them victory, hid the spies under stalks of flax on her roof. She lied to the king's men, sending them on a wild goose chase out of the city. "I know that the Lord has given you this land," Rahab told the spies she had saved. "A great fear has fallen on us, for we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. As soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." The spies agreed, on the condition she hang a scarlet cord from her window and gather her whole family into her house when the Israelites returned to take the city. Rahab helped the spies escape out her window and down the city wall on a rope. She told them to hide in the hills for 3 days until the pursuit died down before returning to their camp. The spies made it back safely and reported to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Early the next morning, Joshua rallied the people to the riverbank, with the Ark of the Covenant carried by the priests at the head of the procession. At Joshua's command, as soon as the priests' feet touched the water's edge, the flow of the Jordan ceased. The water piled up in a heap a great distance away, and the riverbed lay dry before them. The priests carried the ark to the middle of the river and stood firm as the entire nation passed by, walking on dry ground through the midst of the Jordan, a miracle echoing the parting of the Red Sea a generation before. Joshua then had 12 men, 1 from each tribe, take a stone from the center of the river to build a memorial on the shore. He set up another 12 stones in the river where the priests had stood. These monuments would stand as enduring reminders to future generations of the day Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry land because the Lord was with them. When the crossing was complete, the waters crashed down again in full flood the moment the priests' feet touched the far side. For the first time in 40 years, the manna ceased and the people ate from the produce of the land. They celebrated the Passover, then made preparations to assault Jericho. But first, Joshua encountered a mysterious swordsman near the city. "Are you for us or for our enemies?" Joshua demanded. "Neither," the warrior replied. "But as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." Joshua fell face down in reverence, realizing this was no mere man but an angel of the Lord, perhaps the Lord himself. The divine messenger gave Joshua strange battle plans. The army was to march around the city once each day for 6 days, with 7 priests carrying ram's horn trumpets ahead of the Arkansas. On the 7th day, they were to circle the city 7 times. Then the priests would give a long trumpet blast, the people would shout, and the walls of Jericho would collapse. Joshua followed the Lord's instructions precisely. For 6 days they marched around the city in silence, as the people of Jericho fearfully watched from the parapets, wondering what the Israelites were up to. On the 7th day, at Joshua's order, the priests sounded a long blast on their trumpets, and the people gave a mighty shout. At that very instant, the walls of Jericho crumbled to the ground before their eyes. The Israelite army charged in, overtaking the panicked city and destroying it completely, as the Lord had commanded. Only Rahab and her family were spared, brought out safely by the 2 spies because of the oath they had sworn to her. With Jericho captured, the Israelites surged forth to take city after city, the Lord driving out their enemies before them. Word of their victories spread, along with the rumor that their God fought for them. Some, like Rahab, wisely chose to align with the Israelites and their all-powerful deity. Others decided to resist, like the Amorite kings who banded together to make war against Joshua. At Gibeon, Joshua led the Israelites in a surprise dawn attack, routing the much larger Amorite army. As the enemy fled, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, killing more than the Israelites slew with the sword. The day was growing short and the battle was not yet won. So Joshua cried out, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you moon, over the valley of Ajalon." Miraculously, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day, giving the Israelites time to finish the rout. There has never been a day like it before or since. Thus Joshua and the Israelites took the whole region in a sweeping campaign, destroying 31 kings in all. After years of warfare, Joshua divided up the conquered territory among the 12 tribes. Judah and the sons of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh received the largest and choicest allotments, while the priestly tribe of Levi was given cities scattered throughout. The Israelites, now numbering over 600,000 fighting men besides women and children, settled down in the land flowing with milk and honey that the Lord had sworn to give Abraham centuries before. When the time drew near for Joshua to die at the ripe old age of 110, he gathered the people together one last time. Like Moses before him, Joshua recounted the Lord's faithfulness and mighty acts on Israel's behalf, and challenged them to keep walking in obedience to the Lord's commands. He warned them not to intermarry with the pagan peoples still remaining in the land, nor serve their false gods, lest they forfeit the blessings they enjoyed. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, Joshua declared. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. The people answered as one, "We too will serve the Lord, because he is our God." Then Joshua recorded these things in the book of the law of God. He took a large stone and set it up under the oak tree near the holy place of the Lord as an enduring witness of their vow. Soon after, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. They buried him in the hill country of Ephraim, in the land he had been allotted. And Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. And Eleazar son of Aaron also died and was buried at Gibeah, which had been allotted to his son Phinehas in the hill country of Ephraim. So ended the saga of the Exodus generation. What had begun with a helpless band of Hebrew slaves suffering under the whips of their Egyptian masters had culminated in the birth of a free and powerful nation in a rich and bountiful land of their own. The promises made by Yahweh to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had come to pass through a series of improbable conquests, dramatic reversals, and stupendous miracles. There could be no doubt that the God of Israel was the one true God above all. The former slaves were now more than conquerors through him who was faithful to all his promises. The Israelites, however, would soon forget the lessons learned by their wilderness-wandering forefathers. With the original conquerors of Canaan gone, a new generation arose who had not seen the Red Sea parted, the Jordan dried up, the walls of Jericho toppled by faith, or the sun arrested in the sky by Joshua's command. Neglecting to drive out the dwindling Canaanites as the Lord had instructed, the Israelites began adopting the depraved practices of the pagans around them. Rather than monotheistic devotion to Yahweh, they added the Canaanite fertility gods Baal and Asherah to their pantheon. Sexual immorality, even ritual prostitution, became commonplace at the high places where the people gathered to sacrifice to idols. They forgot the Lord and worshipped the stars, indulged in sorcery and divination, even sacrificed their own children in the fires of Molech. All the sins that had doomed the original Canaanite inhabitants they had displaced. It was a tragically short descent from the highs of the conquest to the depths of depravity. This marked the start of the turbulent period of the Judges, when every man did what was right in his own eyes. God periodically allowed Israel's enemies to oppress them as punishment for their unfaithfulness. When the people cried out for deliverance, the Lord would raise up a judge to save them, mighty men and women of valor like Othniel, Deborah, Gideon, and Samson. But the reprieves were always temporary. As soon as the judge died, the people quickly reverted to their former wickedness, sinking to new lows with each cycle. Though the Lord's anger burned against the rebellious Israelites, in his mercy he did not utterly destroy or forsake them. For their sake and to keep his promises to the patriarchs, he preserved a faithful remnant. Men like Boaz, who selflessly redeemed the widow Ruth and her family heritage. Women like Hannah, who dedicated her miraculous son Samuel to the Lord's service. And so, even through seasons of darkness and chaos, the Lord advanced his redemptive purposes, setting the stage for the emergence of the Israelite monarchy and the messianic line destined to bless all nations. The story that began with an unlikely promise to a childless couple in the far-off land of Ur was still being written, with the best chapters yet to come.